Jerusalem, touched by God, transformed by man. It is the holy city to half the human race. For Jews, Christians, and Muslims, a city with soul and spirit. Sitting high in the Judean hills, just 30 miles inland from the eastern shore of the Mediterranean, Jerusalem has always been a magnet for people of faith. Abraham, our father in faith, was ready to sacrifice his son here. King David, the man after God's own heart, set up his capital here, where later his son Solomon would build the temple around the greatest and holiest sacrament of God's presence in the Old Testament, the Ark of the Covenant. 1,000 years later, the story of Jesus, David's descendant, begins a few miles down the road in Bethlehem, but it was Jerusalem where it all led to. Jerusalem is the place where Jesus came on pilgrimage every year and finally to die. It is here we begin our pilgrimage to make his story our story, in the land where history becomes mystery. This scale model of first-century Jerusalem shows what a dominant position the temple and its courtyards held in relation to the rest of the city. Jerusalem was more like a temple with a city built around it. Back when this second temple was standing, a young prophet rode in on a donkey and turned the place upside down. Later, Jesus identified himself with the temple by presenting himself as God's permanent dwelling place among men. His own death prefigured the destruction of the temple as the dawning of a new age. The hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. Yet it was in Jerusalem that the first Christian community was born, and today, almost 2,000 years later, the Church in the Holy Land has survived as a continual living presence here, despite many difficulties and against all odds. In AD 70, the Romans under Titus burned down the temple. The Wailing Wall is all that remains of the western ramparts that surrounded the temple of Jesus' day. It had earlier been rebuilt by the exiles returning from Babylon and by Herod the Great. The first Christians saw its destruction as the fulfillment of Jesus' prediction of the fall of Jerusalem. Not one stone would remain upon another was the sign of the passing away of the old covenant and the birth pangs of the new. From the day after the destruction of the sanctuary until today, Jews from all over the world still gather here to weep and pray each year on Tisha B'Av, the anniversary of the destruction of the temple. The name Jesus of Nazareth highlights the importance of this otherwise insignificant small town not mentioned in the Old Testament. Today, Nazareth is home to a large Christian population. The old village is hidden in a natural basin almost entirely covered by churches, with the main dome in the form of a tent, marking the site of the Annunciation and reminding us where, according to John's Gospel, the Word became flesh and pitched his tent among us. By his obedience to Mary and Joseph, and by his humble work during the long years in Nazareth, Jesus gives us the example of holiness in daily life. Nazareth is first mentioned in the Bible at the time of the Annunciation, when the angel Gabriel came to the Virgin Mary. Do not be afraid. You have won God's favor. You are to conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you must name him Jesus. He will be great and will be called Son of the Most High. The early church father Irenaeus called Mary the new Eve. The knot of Eve's disobedience was untied by Mary's obedience. What the Virgin Eve bound through her unbelief, Mary loosened by her faith.
نؤمن بإله واحد عابد ضابط الكل خالق السماء والأرض كل ما يرى وما لا يرى وبرب واحد يسوع المسيح ابن الله الوحيد المولود من الآب قبل كل الدهور إله من إله نور من نور إله الحق من إله الحق مولود غير مخلوق مساوي للآب في الجوهر الذي به كان كل الشيء الذي مجد نحن البشر وبنجد الخلاص.
The cave under the basilica's central choir may have been an annex to Mary's house. To the left, a small sanctuary contains graffiti from the time of the Judeo-Christians, the first followers of Jesus. The ancient inscription, Hail Mary, here, is proof of the long history of devotion to Mary, whom the first Christians called the New Ark of the Covenant. The sanctuaries of these first Christians are the most authentic link in the unbroken chain of Palestinian Christians here in the Holy Land until today. After the silent years of Nazareth, Jesus left the village of his childhood at the beginning of his public life, but later returned there to reveal his mission in the local synagogue one Sabbath. The Spirit of the Lord is on me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the afflicted. He has sent me to proclaim freedom to captives, sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim a year of favor from the Lord. The lovely village of Ein Kerem lies hidden in the Judean hills below the southwestern corner of today's Jerusalem. It was the traditional home of the priest Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth. Here Mary visited her cousin before the birth of John the Baptist. Elizabeth's greetings have become the prayer of the countless faithful throughout the ages. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb. Luke 1:42. While still in his mother's womb, John the Baptist, like David before the Ark of the Covenant, leapt for joy at the sound of Mary's voice. My soul doth magnify the Lord, and my spirit hath rejoiced in God my Saviour. For he hath regarded the low estate of his handmaiden. For behold, from henceforth all generations shall call me blessed. For he that is mighty hath done to me great things, and holy is his name. When Herod the Great was named